from the pilgrims and to the buffaloes who once ruled the plain. Like the vultures circling beneath the dark clouds, looking for the rain, looking for the rain. Just like the cities that stagger on the coastline, in a nation that just can't stand much more. Like the forest buried beneath the highway, never had a chance to grow, never had a chance to grow. And now it's winter, winter in America. Yes, and all of the healers have been killed or sent away. Yeah, but the people know it's winter. Winter in America. And ain't nobody fighting, 'cause nobody knows what to say. Save your soul, Lord knows, from winter in America. The Constitution, a noble piece of paper, with free society, the struggle but they died in vain. And now democracy is a ragtime on the corner, hoping for some rain. They look like he's hoping for some rain. And I see the robins perched in barren treetops. They're watching last-ditch races marching across the floor. But just like the peace signs that vanished in our dreams, never had a chance to grow. Never had a chance to grow. And now it's winter. Winter in America, and all of the healers have been killed or betrayed. Yeah, but the people know it's winter. Lord knows it's winter in America. Nobody fighting, 'cause nobody knows what to say. Save your soul from a winter in America. Stick. it's winter, winter in America, and all of the healers done been killed or sent away. Yeah, the people winter in America. And ain't nobody fighting 'cause nobody knows what to say. And ain't nobody fighting 'cause nobody knows, nobody knows. And ain't nobody fighting 'cause nobody knows what to say.
Check 1, 2. Mic check 1. Mic check 1, 2. All right. Peace and love. Peace and love, everyone. Peace and blessings to you all. And I thank you all for joining me this evening. Now, as I must state that this is not a regularly scheduled health walk program. But I needed to come in and wanted to come in anyway so that I can keep my consistency going and have a little discussion about things that are happening in the world, things that are happening in the country, doing a little political commentary. I won't be dealing with, I won't be dealing with much of any level of health on a regular sense. But we all know that anything that happens that's going on within our physical self, within our physical environment, within our physical existence, always has an effect on health. Excuse me. So, as I walk through my discussion tonight, my teaching lesson tonight, it eventually will find its way back to health. But anyone who's familiar with Gil Scott-Heron and those within a certain age group would be more familiar with Gil Scott-Heron because he was a phenomenal artist, phenomenal poet, political activist, and he wrote songs and did poems in the 60s, 70s, and the 80s to kind of give a layout of things that were happening in the country. And that particular song, Winter in America, transcends time as we see it today. He released that tune in 1974, and he put some messages within that song that kind of gave an overview of things that were happening in the 70s. But it was not just the 70s. You can go back into the 60s, the 50s, and the 40s, or you can come forward up to today, where he talks about particularly democracy is ragtime standing on the corner, where it's become nothing but a sheet of paper now, and the robins are perching in barren trees. Surely there is a winter coming in America, and not just the fact that it's seasonal. Yeah, we are approaching winter seasonally. Winter will be here in about 26 days, I guess. What's the date? The 30th of October. Yeah. Well, I'm sorry. Not 26 days. Roughly about 60 days, give or take. No, no, no. I'm sorry. Oh, 56 days. My apologies. So, but understanding the message that he was delivering in that song, it's apropos for today because we see things that are happening um, throughout the country that gives us a collective view of what he was discussing or what he was talking about in the song "Winter for America." And I'm going to mention some information, read a few articles, not actually read a few articles, but I'm going to mention a few articles that I pulled off today that kind of validates his that song "Winter in America." But first, you know, before I do that, I'm going to do a few things real quick. So today is the 30th of October, and there is a significance. Peace and blessings, nephew. Thank you for joining me again tonight. I'm gonna have to come up with a some sort of acknowledgement to you and other ones of you who come in religiously and support the health walk or support spiritual pathways holistic healing because whenever I'm going live, you and others are always here to support, and I appreciate that. um, as I said, when we continue to grow and continue to elevate, you can always say, yeah, I was one of the health walks day one, and you continue to show up and show support each and every time that I'm live or that we are live. So, and I truly appreciate that. Thank you. But today is October the 30th. Um, there is a significance to the ending of October, and I'll get into that in just a few seconds. Bitter and sweet, sweet and bitter, um, to some level. But I also want to acknowledge um, a very dear friend. Actually, it was I will say two friends, but one was a very dear friend in Jegna who made transition in August, and my apologies for not mentioning this and not acknowledging him earlier than now. But it was last month when we had a memorial service for him. Elder's name Cecil Josiah, and Cecil was very instrumental, very influential in my life. It was him who introduced me to a lot of the material that I have on my bookshelf, a lot of the material that I speak of and that I've been slowly introducing, and been confident enough to introduce when I do um, some of my solo shows. He influenced me in beginning to study metaphysics in the early 90s, where I was just, you know, a young dude. Um, I was already introduced and becoming familiar with the history of us as a people, and was getting my feet wet in that arena when he came along and introduced me to metaphysics and beginning to work on me and develop me spiritually. And I am truly indebted to that contribution that he gave me. Um, and I will always say that he was the springboard that brought forth the person who sits in front of this screen and speaks on this microphone, the person whom is known as Malik Adisa Jana. But of course, back then when he introduced me to metaphysics, I was known under my birth name, and then eventually, everything else unfolded to where you see me today. So I'm definitely indebted to the influence and the knowledge that he brought to me and the encouragement to continue to push on and learn this vast array of information that sits underneath of the umbrella of metaphysics. And I will continue to learn and continue to educate and continue to, in this on this platform, continue to share that information with others. So peace to him, peace and blessings to him. Rest in power, rest in peace, and peace be upon him as he travels and becomes an ancestor and now has become fully engaged in his spiritual energy that we draw from as we continue to walk here in our physical form. Thank you for that. And there was another childhood friend of mine that made transition. Um, I believe it was Saturday, and I won't call his name, but I do want to just acknowledge the fact that people within my life who were close to my life have recently made transition, which also brings me to tomorrow. Now, um, tomorrow will be October 31st, of course, Halloween, and I always celebrate Halloween. But what's impactful and significant to myself and to my siblings is tomorrow is the 5th anniversary of our mom's passing. And I always take time to acknowledge, yes, the significant loss of her and, what she meant to me and my brother and sisters, and to nephews and nieces and cousins, what she meant to all of us within our family structure. We always take the time, I always take the time, and my brother and my sisters take the time to acknowledge the passing of her, which will be tomorrow, October 31st. Now, the reason why I always say this is a bittersweet moment for me, and it will always be etched into these events will always be tied in together with me because my mom passed a day before my birthday. And the significance of that, or the sadness or the celebration of that, is that she made transition and became an ancestor, an elder on the 31st, made her transition or started her transition on the 31st of October. And my birthday, November the 1st, is always going to be tied in together. So it's a sad day. But it's also a happy day because it's, as I mentioned about Elder Cecil, I have my mom in the spiritual sense who gives that energy and power to myself and to others of my family, my brother, my sisters, cousins, nephews, nieces, whoever, you know. Um, she is there spiritually with us as we continue to elevate ourselves and walk through this thing physically, this thing we call life physically. So peace and blessings to her as well. Um, Prayers should go out also to the families that are in Jamaica, the Bahamas, or any of the rest of the areas of the Caribbean who just um, had to overcome one of the most devastating storms, a Category 5 that hit their island. And luckily, as it's been reported so far, there hasn't been um many casualties, and blessings to that there hasn't been many casualties. But again, of course, they're still sifting through the wreckage, through the destruction, and the totals may go up, the casualties may go up, but as it stands right now, it seems to be pretty low, and that's a blessing with such a devastating storm that there wasn't many lives that were lost, and that would still we need to have our prayers elevate so that the families who either lost life, lost property, lost anything that was significant to them, um, that they will have a quick turnaround and be able to resume their life as they knew it prior to this devastating storm. So, all right, let's get to it. Um, I wanted to be able to build on some information that we were discussing in the previous shows that we were having dealing with mind, and figure out a way to be able to tie it into the things that are happening and beginning to unfold um, in this country today, and of course throughout the world, because anything that happens in this country has an effect to affects every other parts of the world to some degree. To some degree, a lot of the so-called allies or countries that were once um, in lockstep with the United States, with this country here, are beginning to pull back um, to a degree because they see that there is a inkling of destruction that's on the horizon. So they don't want to be caught in the path of this destruction of um, this and I'm searching for the most political word to use. And I know it is, I'm on my podcast, and I know, sometimes we aren't very political, politically correct, but I wanted to use a word that is, I guess you can say, is politically correct. But what the hell? I mean, truth is truth. But we're on a path of destruction, and that's for damn sure. So I titled this show tonight and asking the question, are we approaching the precipice? And then when we sit back and analyze and kind of view the things that are happening, I think it's safe to say, I think that we can, with all honesty, say that yes, we are definitely approaching the precipice. The question that we should have to ourselves and to others in conversations is, once we do reach what is the precipice and we come closer and closer to it, do we then fall off the cliff? That's the question we need to have. And if we don't soon realize how close we are to the precipice, yes, we will tumble off the cliff. Here's some questions, a few questions, or a few articles. First, I want to deal with before I get into the deep topics of what my main discussion is. I just wanted to first of all, again, give prayers to those who are caught up in this government shutdown, and it's been 20, 30 days now where those who are furloughed have not received a paycheck, and that within itself is um that within itself is a travesty. That you have 30 days of people, 30 days, people have gone 30 days and have not been able to economically support their families, support their home. And it doesn't look like there's going to be any change in this situation going forward. Um, you know, you got finger pointing going all over the place, but the reality of it is that while people are on in the legislator in this legislation branch are pointing fingers at each other, you have people, and they're getting paid, by the way. You have people who aren't getting paid, who are down to their last penny, probably dipping into their savings. And I mentioned before that, when we are in a certain economic group, I identified those levels as um, lower class, lower class, middle lower class, and upper lower class, because the middle class has completely been the middle class was eradicated during the 80s when Reagan was the president. You know, policies and things that he pushed through um, completely wiped out what would be identified as the middle class during that prior to that. So we had the lower class, the middle lower class, and the upper lower class. And when we have those elements, those levels of society that are missing checks, don't have a lot of savings built up, and trying to find ways to survive, trying to find ways to be able to get by based upon what little bit of income that they were able to receive prior to um, October the 1st. So you can see now that states are beginning to find ways to be able to try to alleviate some of the pressures that are happening with this government shutdown. So states like New York, and there are other states, Louisiana, New Mexico, Vermont, Virginia, Oregon, um, are starting to declare states of emergency because they need to go into their coffers to pull out money to be able to give to uh, the food banks, so that the food banks have enough money to be able to purchase food to put on their shelf to in preparation for the wave that's about ready to hit, because we know that there is a wave that has started to trickle. But after the first of November, which is 2 days from today, where SNAP benefits are no longer able to be provided as funding, you're going to see a large influx of people going to food banks to be able to feed their families. And this is all happening while you see the legislative branch tussling and pulling back and forth between what's insanity and what's sanity. to be able to fund the government and be able to put things back in place so that people can go back to work. People can do what's necessary for them to be to economically support their family. But I understand that there is components that are involved, and there's layers that are involved in why the government, why the Democratic Party refuses to bend and capitulate to this crazy budget that was been put forth that completely guts healthcare, completely guts other social programs that were available for people who were struggling day in and day out just to be able to make ends meet. I understand them not wanting to capitulate and bow down to this craziness, to this madness. But unfortunately, in their political stance, the people who are being hurt from all of this bullshit are innocent. They're just trying to find ways to survive. And I said before, I don't know what it's going to take for people to come to their senses. I really don't. The only thing that we can do that is the bare minimum is try to help as much as we can. Those who are employed, those who are still getting a check, those who are parts of organizations, social organizations, church organizations, find ways to be able to put together food drives and kind of pool resources and money together to help those who are caught up in this struggle. Because even though people are struggling today, and it's a significant amount of people who are struggling today, after Saturday, after Saturday, it's estimated that 41 million people, 41 million children, it's either 41 or 45 million children will be facing the inability to nourish themselves because the SNAP benefits, which was once at one point called food stamps, but now it's called SNAP benefits, is no longer available to be funded. And now you got starving children with the inability to find ways to eat. Yeah. Winter in America. Another article from the Washington Post revealed Pentagon orders states National Guard to form quick reaction forces for crowd control. This is something that's happening, that has been an executive order signed throughout the entire country, all 50 states and territories, where the National Guard, 20,000 National Guard members across the U.S. to carry out Trump's order on subduing civil unrest. And what is going on here? These are actions that have not been a part of the mainstream functions of this country for a number of decades. And when there was civil unrest, there was always a creation or a catalyst that created the civil unrest. And one thing that really that comes to mind are the riots that took place, the protests that took place during the civil rights era, the riots that took place during assassinations of Dr. King, the riots that took place in L.A., Chicago, and areas of particularly after the Dr. King assassination. There were riots all over the place, and the National Guard, of course, were called in to be able to help deal with the the civil unrest that was taking place. The National Guard was called in when um, they had to where this schools when integration took place, and we were now being ushered into um, schools into a school system that um, or schools that where we were no longer the predominant, where we weren't within our own schools. We were integrated into white schools, and of course there was some resistance to that, and the National Guard was called in, but it wasn't something where there was an extended period that the country itself was facing, and it was just in pockets and areas. It wasn't throughout the entire country, all 50 states. Now we're talking about 50 states and territories where National Guardsmen want to be trained to be able to deal with and subdue civil unrest. Well, what's causing the civil unrest? And why do you need to have preparation? Why do you need to prepare the National Guard to do this unless you are anticipating that there is going to be continually be civil unrest? Well, what's causing the civil unrest? Because nobody's been assassinated. No one is marching for particular rights as it was in the civil rights era. Uh, there's not any integration where we're trying to integrate schools. So what is the catalyst that's going to cause people to be civilly unrested? What is it that will cause people to be civilly unrested? Is it your policies? Is it your behavior? Is it your threat to the democratic existence of this country that's causing people to protest and demonstrate and resist the things that are happening? And you're anticipating that this is going to be widespread throughout 50 states and territories? I mean, you're talking about even preparing for the National Guard to go into small territories like Guam, Puerto Rico, um, it's Samoa, places where these little small countries, little small territories that the United States colonized, and now they fly the American flag. They're talking about civil unrest in these areas, and of course in D.C. as well. So they're preparing the National Guard to be able to subdue civil unrest, as if they understand that something is coming, something is on the horizon, something is going to happen, or something is happening where people will be going to continue to be in mass protests in resistance to the things that are happening. You don't you don't board up windows unless you know a storm is coming. People who are familiar with hurricanes, when they are and when it's announced that a hurricane that you're in the path of a hurricane, they do things that are necessary to be able to protect your home. They border up windows, doors, and things like that, so that it could weather the storm that's coming. In preparation to a storm that is coming, you don't prepare for something unless you understand that something is happening and something is coming. So there is a storm that's brewing, but I don't care how many soldiers you train, 20,000 National Guardsmen. When there is civil unrest because of the shit that's happening, the unjust things that are happening, the threat to freedom and civility is happening, people come and they rise up above what is happening and protest in the streets. And 20,000 um, guardsmen, National Guardsmen, it's not enough to be able to deal with what's about to happen. But these are things that are happening when people recognize and realize what is contributing to the possibility or the probability of their civil liberties being taken away from them. And this is this is a drum that's been beating since January. It was understood by those who were being analytical of things that were being placed in down on written on paper and printed in books. Speaking of this 2025, the Project 2025, where those who were reading and analyzing the information that was written in that book, in that 900-page document, that this A is going to happen, B is going to happen, C is going to happen, D is going to happen. But we ignored that and allowed a clown be reinstituted, reinstalled as the head of your governance structure. And even as his mind melts away and he continues to display himself in the public arena as a man who is completely riddled with dementia. And I'm not making fun of people who have dementia. I'm sorry for that analysis, but this man is the head of the United States governance structure, and he's displaying himself as being incognizant of any and everything that he involves himself in, babbling on about things that are unrelated to situations and circumstances that affects not only the people in this country but throughout the entire world. So now he has this bright idea based upon what he's seeing and hearing throughout the entire structure of the world. There are certain groups that or certain countries that are testing nuclear weapons. He now decides that United States is going to start testing nuclear weapons again. Nuclear weapons haven't been tested. There has been treaties that have been created, and nuclear weapons have not been tested since 1992, over 30 plus years ago. So he decides that that is within the interest or the best interest of this country, and to maintain, I guess, global dominance, that he has to show a show of force or a show of strength. They even have this moniker. I saw the some of the banners that they have sitting printed and hanged on areas where he's done public speaking. Peace through power or something like that, which is a complete oxymoron. Peace through power. Knowing that regardless of how powerful you are, or how powerful you believe or perceive yourself to be, there's always going to be someone else who can be just as powerful as you. So there is no such thing as peace through power. Peace is peace. And we always find ways to be able to strive to protect what it is as the existence and the understanding of what peace is, without resisting to infuse a show of force or show of power to bring about what we perceive to be peace. And in the books, there are the books that I'm going to delve into will give that information or confirm or validate that information based upon the discussion or the literature that was written in these books. Peace and blessings to you, Brother Tony. Thank you for showing up and thank you for supporting. Don't be a stranger. Be with me throughout this whole experience that I call the health walk. But it's nice for you to join me tonight, and I hope your family and everybody is doing well, and continue to support. But getting back to what I was saying, there's a couple of paragraphs that I'm going to read in two books. And I've mentioned and I've read a few of these paragraphs in this book before called Democracy is Self Government, and also one of my favorite philosophers, teachers, J. Krishnamurti. I was reading and pulling out information in his book called Total Freedom. So I'm about to get into or step into that in just 1 second. All right. So I want to step into what we were dealing with in that series. We were talking about mind elevation or mental elevation, and being able to understand what we were talking and having a discussion about mental or mind elevation. And I was tying it into in the last iteration, I was tying into the senses and how valuable the senses are in being able to have heightened awareness through our senses that allows us to interpret things that are happening in our environment. And one of the senses that we utilize, there's two senses that we utilize more than others to be able to gather information, for us to be able to be in sync and in tune with what's happening within our environment. And that's our sight and that's our hearing. In this particular discussion, I'm going to highlight or focus on our hearing, and how our consciousness plays a role, or how hearing plays a role in our consciousness. So the consciousness, of course, is the awareness of I, what is. The elevation of mind allows us to be able to elevate mind, and that is achieved through our sense of hearing. Our consciousness is developed through what we consume through thought or from thought, how we react through our experiences, what we believe, and the emotions we cleave to, and the behaviors that often uh, can create prejudices or screens of resistance. And the things we see that are happening with us in this country today, a lot of it is based upon the how we view the world and how we interpret the world through what is identified as screens that creates prejudices. So what do I mean by screens? When I say a screen or screens, something comes in, we interpret things through our senses, and based upon whatever prejudices or experiences that we have prior, as we continue to receive the experience coming in through our senses, there is an overlay that creates a judgment, or it creates a prejudice or interpretation based upon our experiences. So we call that, or we identify that as a screen. So with that screen, it does not allow us to completely and fully interpret things in its fullness, because we're applying our prejudices on top of or over top of that experience or over top of that sensory. So look at it in this way. Say you're out and you are um, observing nature, observing a tree. But in your observation of that tree, you know what a tree looks like. It has bark, it has leaves, roots, and things like that. That's you receiving the sensory of that tree through your eyes, and you viewing that tree, and you see in its wholeness, in its complete form. You see that it has bark. It's made of what we identify as wood. It has vegetation, which we identify as leaves, and it has a root system, which allows that root system to dig into the earth to be able to bring in the minerals for it to nourish the existence of that tree and allow it to continue to sustain and grow and live. Now, we're not making any interpretations. We're seeing that tree for what it is. Now imagine you putting on some colored glasses, whatever color the glasses may be, green, orange, purple, blue, yellow, rose, whatever the color of those glasses made, you are putting those over your eyes, and then that becomes the screen. Now you're seeing that tree through glasses that filters out certain components of that tree, and you are now only seeing that tree through the filter or the screen that you are viewing through, or your eyes are seeing, or that you are that appears to be through those glasses with a that alters the view through your eyes. So you're seeing the tree. If you have red colored glasses on or rose colored glasses, you're seeing it in a different color of that tree. The leaves turn a different color. The bark of the tree turns a different color. So when you're seeing that tree, you're not seeing it for its full self. You are making it the color of glasses that you have, that you're viewing that tree from or through, now creates an interpretation, a prejudice that um, changes the perception, the true perception, or the true reality of what that tree is. So that's what I mean by you're looking through things through a screen, which creates prejudices. Why is this significant? Why is this important? You look at the conversations that are happening through the world, throughout this country. I'm going to leave, I mean, set aside the world for now, but there's conversations that are happening in this country that allowed the results that exist today, the reality that we live in today, that place somebody like Donald Trump in as the president of this country, and the cabinet that he put together that are in lockstep with his ideologies, his beliefs, his interpretations. All of them are in some way, shape, or form in sync with each other based upon what his beliefs are, what his governance structure and his understanding what how a country should be governed, regardless of how destructive it is. Nonetheless, this is where we sit. This is where we are today. But how did he get here? He got here based upon the prejudices that a collective group of people, call it what it is, 77 million people, a collective group of 77 million people cast a vote for him based upon the rhetoric that he was perpetuating throughout the entire campaign. And he utilized immigration, he utilized crime, he utilized racist tropes to be able to motivate people to get up off their sofa to go and cast a vote for a man who had already demonstrated in his first term that he was a complete and utter incompetent person, incapable of governing an entire country. Hell, he couldn't even govern his own business, let alone 340 plus million people. That includes 340 million people plus the involvement that takes place in politics, global politics, national politics, programs and things that were provided for people to be able to um, utilize for the purpose of being able to sustain their life. He was totally and utterly incompetent. He completely fumbled the vid-19 fiasco that took place because he was reluctant in taking the necessary actions and necessary steps to quell the spread of a virus based upon his own prejudices. So he got rid of the protocols that were put in place by the previous president. We all know who the previous president was. he decided that it wasn't good enough for him to be able to utilize what was already put in place because he had a disdain and a dislike for a black man who was in the governance structure prior to him. He decided to get rid of all that. And on top of that, he decided that he did not want to act in a way that was going to create a negative light or share a negative light on him. So he withheld information, and it created all kinds of craziness, um, messaging that was devastating and destructive to a million plus people. So they completely forget about his incompetence in even being able to deal with a virus that if he allowed himself to be humble enough to just follow through with the protocols, a million plus people wouldn't have lost their life. So what caused people with that amount of evidence, that amount of information, what caused them to be willing enough to cast a vote to put him back into office? What was their prejudices, their misunderstanding, and their prejudices that looked at people of color as criminals, including us, black people, black men and women, as criminals, as people who were invading their country and taking away their rights and their liberties, taking away their jobs, taking away the comforts, the so-called comforts that they may or may not have had, which would never have been a threat. Excuse me, never impose a threat to them, but they allowed their prejudices to be able to galvanize collectively as a group of people to cast a vote for this man. So when our consciousness is developed through what we consume from thought and how we react through experiences, what we believe and the emotions we cleave to, to create the behaviors, excuse me, often create prejudice or screens of resistance. So you're not able to be able to receive the information in its totality because the screen that you're reviewing, the prejudices that you are experiencing your life through creates resistance to what the reality is, what is actually true. And what's sad about this whole thing is that those who are in power are cunning enough and shrewd enough to be able to utilize the inability of the people to be analytical in their ignorance to be able to push through their objectives and their agendas. Um, so those most often the people who are most often in power, they always going to push through an objective and an agenda. And what it does is it forces others who have autonomy over their own life, the freedoms to live life the way they interpret and the way they see life, it takes away their ability to have those freedoms. And we're looking at what's happening and how they're continuously pushing their ideas. And we're talking about the entire cabinet now and those who support him and those like the billionaires who continue to fund this man, but they're not actually funding him. They're funding the policies that he's been put in place to be able to kind of use as a useful idiot to push these policies through or help to push these policies through. All of them have an objective and an agenda. regardless of whatever that objective and that agenda is, for a small group of people is not a benefit to the larger collective. It's whether it be them finding ways to be able to accumulate more money as they steal money from uh, and exploit the people to accumulate more money, or if it's the continued conversation that's being had about pushing through a so-called um, Christian ideology. And what I mean by Christian ideology, I'm definitely not talking about the true Christianity that existed or that was created in the area of Northeast Africa in the early 30s BCE. We're not talking about that. We're talking about their interpretation was that became a political stronghold or political force through the Catholic Church that ushered through or that continued to travel through up through Western parts of Europe, where every opportunity was given to be able to reinvent or reinterpret the ideologies of a spiritual system that that came forth by protest and understanding of a collective group of people who understood while they were living underneath the tyranny of the Roman government, decided that they wanted to push back and raise up in protest of what was happening. And they used spiritual ideas and understandings of people's human rights to be able to push forth that idea. But as it continued to travel west and became more of a political juggernaut that they utilized to enslave people, utilized to colonize people, utilized to put people in shackles and chains, and that's what the theology that you have or that the majority of us are practicing here in the United States. That is what those are the tenements of what was once a ideology that was beneficial for the elevation of people, with the message that was being given to the person whom they identified as Jesus the Christ. Those philosophies don't you can't find those philosophies in what is being taught in church sittings today. What a majority of those who are sitting in this man's cabinet, their dreams and their aspirations are for to have a theocratic government that is ruled by white men and white men only. So you see them attacking people of color, you see them attacking women, you see them attacking women's rights. Everything that is a suppressive nature towards people other than white men is what they are perpetuating on groups of on larger groups of the people in this country. So that's been their objective. So, and they're using or they use the ignorance or the prejudices of a collective group of people to be able to be a catalyst to get them into a governance structure that allows them to be able to dictate and control and push forth an agenda that benefits them and benefits them only. If you look at some of the uh, videos and reading newspaper articles and the reportings that are coming through from independent media, they'll tell you they're giving you a play-by-play that's happening throughout the entire country. And if you go back and you look at or even have a conversation with people who spent enough time to read what was in this Project 2025 that had been created by the Heritage Foundation and that was created in the 1980s. They created that for the purpose of being able to so-called turn the United States back to a white ruled Christian theological governance structure. That is their that is what they envision. That's what they are dreaming for. And the sad thing is that we bequeath our power to allow this to happen. Um, so you're seeing things that are happening, and I mentioned about um, the ability to listen, the ability to interpret, the ability to read things that are happening, to have a clear and concise understanding of how things are happening throughout the entire country. And we do that by utilizing our ability to listen with our senses that we identify as hearing. But when we turn off our hearing or turn off or allow that information to come through a screen, we do not get the full benefit of what message is being given to us so that we can either be on the same accord or operating and functioning on the same frequency of the information that is coming, that is being projected to us so that we can hear and see what's happening or vibrate on that level so that we can either in tune to the message and allow it to become the ability for us to elevate to a higher level of consciousness, or we do what's being done now, we turn it off. We allow it to come through through a screen or a filter because we do not want to allow ourselves to sit with ourselves and see what relationship we have, what common relationship we have with the message that's being sent to us through our hearing, through our ears. Because there is a message, regardless of whether we ignore it or not, there is a message that's coming. And again, our question, are we approaching the precipice? Total freedom. Drake Krishnamurti. Insights into everyday life. The first and last freedom. To communicate with one another, even if we know each other very well, is extremely difficult. I may use words that may have to you a significance different from mine. Understanding comes when you and I, meet on the same level at the same time. That happens only when there is real affection between people, between husband and wife, between intimate friends. That is real communion. Instantaneous understanding comes when we meet on the same level at the same time. So he again is setting up the table that is saying that the one thing that is difficult for us to do, the most difficult thing for us to do is to be able to sit and listen to a message that's being delivered to us and not allow that message that's being delivered come through and become scrambled through our prejudices, through our screens. And we often see this on display when we're having a conversation with someone. And one thing that we are not allowing ourselves to do is to sit and listen and be engaged intimately in a conversation, because once we hear engage in a conversation, the one thing that we intend to do is place ourselves in the center of that conversation with our prejudices, with our screens, and we do not see or hear the full message that is being delivered. It is very difficult to commune with one another easily, effectively, and with definitive action. I'm using words which are simple, which are not technical, but because I do not think that any technical type of expression is going to help us solve our difficult problems. So I am not going to use any technical terms, either of psychology or of science. I would like to convey by the very simple words which we use in our daily life a deeper significance, but that is very difficult if you do not know how to listen. And when people are out protesting, people are out in mass droves telling you that something is off, something is out of is out of balance, something is not right. They're telling you time and time again that something is not right, something is off balance, something is on the verge of creating a destruction, and people are not paying attention. The governance structure, in their ignorance, is not paying attention. They have their objective and their agenda in mind, and they're going to do whatever it is necessary for them to do it to push it through. But the masses are telling them, stop what it is that you're doing. You are hurting people. You got people in 2 days, 45 million children may go without their food, without having the benefit of eating decent meals to nourish themselves. 45 million children. And that's okay for them because they're trying to pass through an objective and an agenda that benefits them, benefits those who support them, benefits the people who gave them money to be able to allow themselves to get richer and richer and richer. The Jeff Bezos of the world, excuse me, the Elon Musk of the world, who are already billionaires 10 times over, wanting more money. What in the hell can you do with $10 billion in your lifetime? You can't even spend $10 billion in your lifetime. And I don't care whether you are bequeathing it to your children or not, they can't spend $10 billion in a lifetime. I don't think we realize how much money that is, unless, of course, it's fiat currency. And that's the story for a different day. There is an art to listening. To be able to really to listen, one should abandon or put aside all prejudices, pre-formulations, and daily activities. When you are in a receptive state of mind, things can be easily understood. You are listening when your real attention is given to something. But unfortunately, most of us listen through a screen of resistance. We are screened with prejudices, whether religious or spiritual, psychological or scientific, or with our daily worries, desires, and fears. And with these for a screen, we listen. Therefore, we listen really to our own noise, to our own sound, not to what is being said. It is extremely difficult to put aside our training, our prejudices, our inclinations, our resistance, and reaching beyond a verbal expression to listen so that we can understand instantaneously what is happening. So we've turned off the ability for us to be able to listen and understand the message that is being put forth. That allows us to resonate and move in a way that will elevate us consciously, or elevate our consciousness. I'm sorry. So what do? We turn it off, or we make a prejudicial statement, prejudicial, a statement of prejudice, a statement in its most egregious term, a statement of bigotry and racism. and immigrants are coming in and taking our jobs. Immigrants are eating cats and dogs, or eating pets. The ridiculousness of a statement, such a statement like that, is still being uttered up to this very day. There was a conversation that someone was interviewing um, the vice president, where he's still, whether he's joking about it or not, he's still making those statements if it has some significance or some value or truth to it. And these things are being done because there are people who honestly believe that there were people in Ohio, people who look like me, black men and women, who you wouldn't be able to identify whether they were uh, um, uh, American Africans or Africans from other parts of the world, unless they actually spoke and they were speaking another language. They were in this instance or this case, because they were from Haiti, they would have been speaking French. But this racist trope was able to circulate throughout the entire country, where actually people, in their own ignorance, in their own racist behaviors, were creating memes that was showing black men eating cats and dogs. And we actually took this man serious enough to be able to buy into such a ridiculous message. And this was done because of people and their prejudices and their screens, and not willing to listen to what's happening in throughout the entire country, that does not allow the people within the country to be able to elevate to a higher level of consciousness, because it is our prejudices and our behaviors that are stopping us from doing this, from elevating to becoming human beings. And I said this before in previous promos that I did. Moving on. Okay. Hope everybody's doing well and that you're hanging in there with me. And even those who see this on the in the archives, support and subscribe. Yes, nephew, we are 14 subscribers away from 400, and I'm on a serious campaign and we are on a serious campaign to get those 14 subscribers so that we can reach that milestone. And thank you for being diligent in that. Moving forward, so we can have understanding of what is when we recognize without condemnation, without justification, without identification. To know that one is in a certain condition, in a certain state, is already a process of liberation. And pardon me if this sounds choppy, but I didn't want to read the entire chapter. I just pulled this out because I thought this part of this discussion was significant. So he's talking about the process of mind and being able to remove yourself away from, or excuse me, not remove, but to recognize what is and what isn't. And he used this as an example, because the moment you have an understanding of what is, there you no longer have to go through the process of trying to figure things out. You accept the thing as what it is. And he used the example of you being a thief. And sorry for using that analogy, but this is how he used it in his conversation. So let me go to where he makes this statement. Looking. And I didn't mark this out. My apologies. Okay, let me do this. So it is not possible then to be aware of everything as it is, starting from there, so that there can be an understanding, to acknowledge, to be aware of it, to get at that which is, puts an end to a struggle. If I know, okay, here it is right here. And let me mark this out. And he didn't say a thief, he said a liar. My apologies. So he says, if I know that I'm a liar and it is a fact which I recognize, then the struggle is over. To be aware of what one is already the beginning of wisdom, the beginning of understanding, which releases you from time. To bring in the quality of time not in the chronology sense, but as the medium, as the psychological process, the process of mind. That which is in the process of the mind is destructive and creates confusion, because you are constantly in your head trying to debate whether something is or whether it's not. When you actually get to the point of understanding what it is what it is. If I identify myself as a liar, there is no more debating about that. It is the absolute. I am a liar. Now, once you identify what that is, as being a liar, or me being a thief, or me being anything else, gives me the keys, gives me the necessary wisdom to be able to deal with what that situation is or is not. So if I'm a liar, using his example, if I'm a liar and I know that this is what I am, now I can take the time to be able to take the steps to be able to reciprocate that behavior. And that releases the confusion. So how does this relate to what it is what I've been saying before, prior to this me making that statement? It's important because once you identify what you perceive yourself to be, and it is an absolute, you are no longer looking at things through a filter, through a screen, through prejudices. It is the absolute now. And once it becomes the absolute, you can create a motivation, create the energy behind that to deal with what is that true reality. So when we can understand of what is, and when we recognize it without condemnation, without justification, without identification, to know that one is in a certain condition, in a certain state, is already a process of liberation. But a man who is not aware of his condition, of his struggles, tries to be something other than he is, which brings about a habit. So then, let us keep in mind that we want to examine what is, to observe and be aware of exactly what is the actual, without giving it any slant, without giving it any interpretation. It takes an extraordinarily astute mind, an extraordinarily pliable heart to be aware of and to follow what is, because what is constantly moving, constantly undergoing a transformation. And if a mind is tethered to belief, to knowledge, it ceases to pursue, it ceases to follow the swift movement of what is. So you're looking at, within our inability to release or to let go of prejudices, to continue to want to live and observe life through a screen, it does not allow us to move through life, because life itself is excuse me, is not constant. It is always moving. Things are always changing. And then it's our behavior that does not allow us to move along with it. It locks us into a belief system, a structure that continues to, as we continue to allow that belief system to dictate our life, eventually it is going to bring about a sense of destruction, a sense of demise, because that belief structure is rigid. It does not allow itself to be able to flow, to be fluided, excuse me, to be fluid, to exercise fluidity with life itself or be in sync or in concert with life itself, it becomes rigid. And you use this example as water versus rock. Water is fluid, rock is rigid, but the fluidity of that water over time will begin to erode that rock away and dissolve it down to silt. The rock has no ability to be able to move. It's rigid in its existence in itself. With the water represents the fluidity of life. And as life continues to move and flow, and it comes against something that's rigid, eventually that the rigidity of that object is going to eventually become excuse me, is eventually going to succumb to the pressures of the fluidity of that movement of that water, and it will meet its own demise. Well, a rock can only be what a rock is, but that we have the capabilities of being able to flow and be in concert and in frequency with the way life moves and the way life changes. And I apologize if I'm taking a while to be able to get through this, but I think all this information is important. All right. So the next section, where he says there is suffering, and he's dealing with the political system. There is suffering, political, social, religious, or whole psychological being is confused, and all the leaders, political and religious, have failed us. All the books have lost their significance. You may go to the Bhagavad Gita or the Bible or the latest treaty on politics and psychology, and you will find that they have lost that ring, that quality of truth. They have become mere words. You yourself, who are the reaper of those words, are confused and uncertain, and mere repetition of words conveys nothing. Therefore, the words in the books have lost their value. That is, if you quote the Bible or Marx, or the Bhagavad Gita, as you who quote it yourself, uncertain, confused, and your repetition becomes a lie. Because what is written there becomes more propaganda, and propaganda is not truth. So when you repeat, you have ceased to understand your own state of being. You are merely covering with words or of authority and your own confusion. But what we are trying to do is to understand this confusion and not cover it up with quotations, so that it is your response to it. How do you respond to this extraordinary chaos, this confusion, this uncertainty of existence? Be aware of it as it is discussed. Follow not my words, but the thought which is active in you. Most of us are accustomed to being spectators and not to partake in the game. We read books, but we never write books. It has become our tradition, our national and universal habit to be spectators, to look on at a football game, to watch the public politicians or raiders. We are merely the outsiders looking in, and we have lost a certain capacity. Therefore, we want to absorb and partake. We do not want to participate. And again, when we are discussing what democracy is, I mentioned in a previous show that in order for you to be a part of a democracy, you have to participate. There were 100 million people that did not vote in the last election. They refused to participate in this democracy. And when I get to the end of this discussion, which should be in about another 15 minutes, I'm going to tell you the non-participation of not wanting to be a part of participating in a democracy and what that is called. All right. So this is a quick passage. This is from Democracy and Self-Government. And the reason why this is important, when we look at democracy as it being this collective unit of people, which it is, it's a governance structure, and it is, but the ultimate democracy is self-governance of self, being able to have complete and control and autonomy of self. And this is why I make the statement that in order for us to be able to elevate our consciousness, we must at some point in time be comfortable enough in sitting and meditating and being in self, absorbing self, becoming aware of self, and whatever ritual that we can incorporate into our life, it must begin to become a practice so that we can become aware of who we are individually so that we become in sync with ourself and the realities and the existence of other people in this the collective of us as a people on this planet. And I had written this down, just jogging through my mind. And as things were coming through, I had written this down and because it came through my spirit. And I said that religion and spirituality, as it was created, was recreated as rituals to help tune us to the frequencies around us and things that we do. We sing, we dance, we play music, and all of these rituals that we do it for the purpose of being able to become in sync with what is around us, to come in sync with nature, to come in sync and resonate on the same frequency as others around us. And the only way we can achieve this is to be able to sit with self and be able to listen and become one with self, to meditate and understand and relieve or release ourselves from the prejudices, from the screens that we have and created or that has been forced or created upon ourselves through our experiences. So, dealing with the what I was mentioning about with the democracy and the self-governance of what a democracy is, and I said, the ultimate democracy is the self-governance to be autonomous with self, and the only way to do that is to be able to sit and be able to meditate and reflect on us individually. Many of us can't do that. Many of us refuse to be able to refuse to want to sit with self and become one with self. We have to have noise around us all the time. We have to have distractions around us all the time because those distractions inhibit us from being able to become one with self and become understanding of self and reflect on who we are and what we represent. When end my shows, I always end the show with this mantra, this mantra. I reference about the song "The Man in the Mirror" that was sung by Michael Jackson, but I also make the reference that you be the change that you want to see in the world, which means if you are being the change that you want to see in the world, that means you would have to sit inside self, sit with self, and meditate with self to be able to reflect on who you are and how you are able to and capable of influencing your existence, your elevation that will in turn affect and influence others. But in order for you to do that, you have to sit quietly with self and remove yourself from the prejudices, remove yourself from what screens were created through our own experiences that has hardened us, that's made us callous and made us become biased and racist in our behaviors. And I'm not just talking about white people, because all of us come with prejudices. All of us to some degree come with bigotry. But those behaviors are created and manifested through our experiences and in some instances perpetuated through lies. diabolical lies that were created for the self-control of for the be able to have self-control, or excuse me, not self-control, to be able to have collective control over our masses. So reflecting back to some of the campaign messages that were being placed out in the as a message for people to cleave onto, to be able to glean to. They were making references again. I'll go back and reflect to about uh, um, immigrants, and in this case, our Haiti brothers or our Haitian brothers and sisters eating dogs and cats, and people actually believe that. And the only reason why they believe that is because of the prejudices and the bigotry that came along with their experiences, or came along with ideas falsified through someone else's prejudice and someone else's beliefs. It was the the falsification of a people, an entire group of people, African people, that allowed another group of people to colonize an entire country. Excuse me, not an entire country, but an entire continent, and then put those same people in shackles and chains because they use a doctrine. They use papal bull. They use dum diverses that was created by the Spaniards and the Portuguese to go and usurp people off of the entire continent and bring them to an area that forced them and forced them into a sense of servitude because they didn't have the same belief structures that those people had. And I mentioned that already about their version of Christianity. So they used that doctrine, that exploited that information, that doctrine. They exploited the words of a person or a group of people that created that spiritual system, exploited those words, exploited that movement to be able to put people in shackles and chains and bring them into the West and use that servitude. And those behaviors, those beliefs, those prejudices, those biases, those racist tropes have continued in the beginning and have continued even up to this day. That's the only way that someone is going to believe that another human being is eating dogs and cats, or coming in as criminals to disrupt your pristine system, your pristine society, calling them criminals and saying that they were going to rape your women. The only way you believe something like that is if you already had a prejudice in their mind, a biasness or a racist idea or belief in their mind already, because otherwise that shit don't fly. If you are thinking on a level of sanity, there has not been any evidence of anyone doing such craziness or foolishness. They did the same thing uh, when the Birth of a Nation came out in the 1900s, and one of the most racist presidents, Woodrow Wilson, had a screening of that movie in the White House. And they did the same thing to us, to black men, saying that black men were criminals. And even up to this day, that same bullshit lie is still being attached to the stigmatism, or excuse me, attached to the existence and the reality of black men, that we're criminals. This man even made a reference to that in a speech that he did or a conference that he did in the White House, that when he was talking about the brothers in DC, that they're born criminals. Born criminals. And there's nothing that can be done to change the trajectory of the path because they're destined to be criminals. That's racist behavior. That's racist rhetoric, but it allows that to be able to gin up the base that supports him to continue to usher in a movement that takes away the autonomy of a group of people and be able to continue to pursue what is identified as a democracy. because they want a theocratic government. The people who are backing them, they want a theocracy, and they want to continue to be rich off the exploitation in the backs of people. Democracy or destruction. Excuse me, democracy or destructionism. Democracy is self-government. This book again is the author of Harold Percival. Excellent book. You pick it up and read through it. Democracy or destructionism. In the present human crisis, all schools of thought or isms concerning government must of necessity come under one or the other of two principles of thought: the thought of democracy or the thought of destructionism. Democracy's self-government as individuals and as a people. Before there can be a truly self-governed people, each one of the people who has a voice in the government as a vote should be self-governed. He cannot be self-governed if his judgment is swayed by prejudice or party or by self-interest. Listen to what I'm saying. Please listen to what I'm saying. On all moral questions, he must be governed by law and justice, by rightness and reason from within. Destructionism is brute force, inconsiderate violence of self-interest. Brute force is opposed to law and justice. It disregards all control other than brute force and will destroy everything in a way of it's getting what it wants. Excuse me, let me repeat that. Read that again. Brute force is opposed to law and justice. It disregards all control other than brute force and will destroy everything in the way of its getting what it wants. Excuse me. Thank you, DC, for that statement. And I say that you say they want a technocracy. There is an aspect of them that want a technocracy, but there is also there is also a segment of them that's in the governance structure that want a theocracy too. The war in the world is between the moral power of democracy and the brute force of destructionism. Between the two, there can be no compromise or agreement. One must be the conqueror of the other. And because brute force spurns agreement and morals as weakness and cowardice, brute force must be conquered by force. Any suspension of war will only prolong the mental agony and bodily suffering of human beings. For democracy to be the victor, the people must be conquerors of themselves by self-government. The victory of democracy by a people who are self-governed, which will teach the conquered ones who represent brute force to be also self-governed. Then there can be a genuine peace and honest prosperity in the world. Were brute force to conquer morals and democracy, then brute force will eventually bring ruin and destruction on itself. The leaders in the war can lead and direct, but they cannot decide which side will be victorious. All people on the earth are by their thoughts and acts now deciding and eventually will decide whether brute force shall bring ruin and destruction on the earth, or whether the moral power of democracy prevail and develop enduring peace and true progress in the world. It can be done. Each human in the world who feels and desires and can think is, by so feeling and desiring and thinking, one in determining whether we, the people, will be a self-government and which will conquer in the world, self-government or brute force. There is much danger in the delay in postponing the issue. This is the time, while it is a live question in the minds of the people, to settle the question. And just to be clear, before I read the final statement or the final few paragraphs, just to be clear, the theocracy is a front, possibly. The thing is, we have to be active enough to not allow any of it to happen whether it be a technocracy or a theocracy, because it's still going to be a sense of rule by the so-called 1 or 2%, where the 98 or 99% of the people continue to become exploited by those who are in rule. But just to be clear of what a democracy is, this country has never had, even though the idea is to have a democracy, it hasn't achieved democracy as of yet. We were trying to move towards that, but there are components, there are elements that would not allow this to totally become a democracy, because people are ruled or continue to becoming ruled by their own, I would say their own isms, their own thirst to be tied into ideas that are projected as superiority. Let me put it that way. And this is what white supremacy is about. So as long as they continue to believe that there is an inferior people and then superior people, there will never be able to achieve democracy. Because as I mentioned before, those we're talking about, looking through life or operating through life as a screen, as a prejudice, and you can't grow, you can't elevate when you continuously operate and view life through a prejudice or through a screen. The only way to be able to elevate and create a democracy is to one, be on the same accord with yourself as it relates to others. And in order for that to happen, in order for that to be able to be achieved, you have to take the time long enough to be able to want to sit with self and reflect on self and be able to remove and distract any types of prejudices that you have that has accumulated in your life throughout the many times and the many experiences that you have lived here in this existence. And as I said, all of us come with these prejudices. All of us comes with these screens. All of us come with these biasness, this identify in the most extreme form as bigotry. But we all come with it. And in order for us to be able to elevate to a higher level of consciousness, we have to sit with self long enough to identify what these prejudices are and these screens are, and remove them from our existence. Otherwise we can't elevate, because we're always going to see and operate through life through that screen or through that prejudice. It is important for us to become reflective of self and meditate of self. And once that happens, and once we begin to see or take on the charge of doing that, you'll start to see and resonate on a level that influences other people. And be the change that you want to see in life. Final statement before I close out. And I'm hoping that this translates. I'm hoping that this translates to people who are watching and people who tune in later. The enigma called man. Again, this is from Democracy is Self-Government. This chapter is called The Enigma of Man. Intelligence manifests itself in law and in order throughout universal nature by the regular succession of day and night in other seasons of the year. Creatures of the earth, of the water, and of the air obey their instinctive promptings, each according to its kind. Order prevails everywhere except in man. Among existing things, man is the enigma. Every creature can be depended on to act according to its nature, except man. It cannot be said with certainty what man would do or will not do. No limit can be set to his rise, to his heights, or the sublime. and no beast can sink to the depths of his depravities of man. He is kind and compassionate. He is also cruel and merciless. He is living and considerate of others, yet he hates, yet he hates and is rapacious. Man is a friend and an enemy to himself and to his neighbor. Denying himself the comforts, he would devote his energies to relieving the ills and troubles of others. Yet no theological devil can compare with the fiendishness of man, laboring in crude beginnings through pain and privation, from generation to generation, from age to age, with the unceasing effort, man builds up a great civilization and then destroys it. Working through periods of dark forgetfulness, he slowly emerges and again rises up another civilization, which likewise he blots out. And as often as he creates, he destroys. Why? Because he will not unriddle the riddle and make known to himself the enigma of which he is. He draws from the unfathomed depths and the undiscovered heights of his inner self to rebuild the earth and to vault the sky, to build the earth and to vault the sky. But he falls back defeated at any attempt to enter the realm of his inner self. It is easier for him to pull down mountains and to build up cities. These things can see and handle. These things he can see and handle, but he cannot think his way to his consciousness self, as he can think how to build a road through a jungle, or to build a road to a jungle, or a tunnel through a mountain, or to span a river. To know about himself and to get acquainted with himself, he must think. And he must set with self. I put this notation there as a reminder. He does not see any progress when he tries to think what he really is. Then time is terrible, and his fear is to look through the fortress of his illusions until he is alone with his timeless self. He lingers in his illusions and forgets himself. He continues to draw from his unknown self the images from which he builds, the blessings and the plagues which he spreads abroad, and he continues to create the illusions which seem so real and with which he surrounds himself. Rather than face the dread task and solve the enigma, man tries to flee, escape from himself into world activities, and he makes it his business to create and destroy. And this is all done because man refuses to sit with self long enough to reflect on who he is and what he is, and how to be able to remove any prejudices, any screens, to understand and remove itself from any experiences that leads us to making the decisions that we've made for the sake of preserving ourselves and excuse me, seemingly preserving ourselves in the comforts and the illusions that we've created. We have some work to do. Can we sit long enough to be able to reflect on ourselves long enough to not fall off the cliff? The question that we should continue to ask ourselves tonight and going forward and come in a true reality of is, are we approaching the precipice? There was a movie, The Day the Earth Stood Still. Not the first version, but the second version, the version where Will Smith's son and Keanu Reeves and who was the other person that was in that movie? John Cleese. I think it was John Cleese. John Cleese. And his John Cleese's character was talking to Keanu Reeves' character because Keanu Reeves was sent to Earth to be able to remove the animal life off the planet because they were observing what was happening to man on Earth, and that it was beginning to elevate to operating and behaving through its destructive nature was beginning to threaten the entire planet. And they were saying, we cannot allow this planet to be destroyed because it's far too important to a universal collective, because this planet is identified or is has been said to be a teaching planet. And whether you believe in this reality or not, we've come here, or we are here on this planet learning and exercising and becoming developed and elevating and evolving to, or supposed to be evolving to, higher levels of consciousness. But the premise of the movie was that man is beginning to become out of control in our destructive nature and our destructive behavior, and that now is beginning to threaten the entire planet, and we could not allow, or those who were within the galactical um, governance. I guess I can use that word because I forget there's another terminology that is used. Yeah, within the galactical government, they understood that this was a planet that was far too important to be destroyed. So they had to step in and intercede in what was happening. So as the things were as the mechanisms that were put in place that were going to wipe out the existence of man on this planet and be able to preserve the planet. Remember, the plant life, not the plant life, but the animal life was already lifted off the planet. So the next phase was to be able to destroy anything that was any structure that was created by man, and eventually was going to be man was going to be wiped out based upon through the mechanisms that was being used to destroy man that was brought here and unleashed by Keanu Reeves' character. So there was discussion that John Cleese's character and the Keanu Reeves character was having, and he made the statement. John Cleese made the statement that at the point of the precipice, there have been examples of at the point of the precipice where man was going to destroy itself. Rational minds were able to come up and break through and be able to thwart back what would eventually be the complete and total destruction of man. And this conversation was, and Keanu Reeves was saying, well, we've given y'all plenty of times to be able to prove that this is something that you're capable of doing, and we have not yet seen this happen. There's always a threat that you are going to wipe out the entire existence of this planet, and we can't. And he was saying this country, excuse me, not the country, the planet is too important for something like that to happen. And I thought that conversation was very poignant because it kind of laid out the history of, as technology has grown throughout the years, throughout the decades, man has found ways to continually find ways to be able to destroy itself. So they create more and more sophisticated bombs that will destroy, that will create destruction or mass destruction, forgetting the importance and forgetting the how life itself is precious, and forgetting that whatever is precipitated in acting out its destructive nature, man's destructive nature is going to affect not just man, but it's going to affect the entire planet. And reading the news today and looking at the things that are happening with the government shutdown going that is within its that's in its 30th day now. That could possibly go longer. Well, there is the potential of it going much longer than the previous shutdown that occurred during the first administration of Dumb Donald. Um, him wanting to test nuclear weapons that where testing nuclear weapons was ceased in 1992, over 30 plus years ago, and there was a treaty that was created so that was not necessary to take place. Him wanting to resurrect that, him wanting to train up National Guardsmen and place them in every state of the entire country so that they could subdue any protests that take place while people are tuned into what is happening, what they're seeing, and creating a resistance to what is happening and what is seeing, and pouring into the streets to demonstrate their displeasure of what is happening collectively as to the people. You're seeing all these things beginning to unfold in succession, and is beginning to elevate to levels that are threatening the sovereignty of this country and the people in this country. I don't know what's going to happen in weeks and months to come. We hope that we haven't reached the precipice. But the way things are looking, and I'm not being hyperbolic in any way, but the way things are looking, we are closely approaching the precipice. The question that we need to ask ourselves: can we turn back? Can we sustain ourselves and look and reflect into ourselves and reflect in ourselves and become convicted enough to change what's happening within ourselves and influence others to make changes as well, so that the governance structure does not fall off the cliff? That's the question we should ask ourselves tonight. And I know this was a long one, and I am hoarse from all this talking. Before I go, I just want to mention this. On November the 14th, I'll be teaching Herb 101 class in the same location at the Bay Store in downtown Frederick. Brand Art Yoga is the name of the store. Acronym BAYR, Bay. Brand Art Yoga. Downtown Frederick on Market Street. I think it's 227. November the 14th. The class is at 6 o'clock. And if you're interested in the class, you can log in to Eventbrite and look for Brand Art Yoga, or you can look for, do a search on my name and it'll come up. And I believe the class is $40. And I did have a discussion with a class that was scheduled for this month, that is a possibility of opening this up so that it can be done online, live online, that could possibly bring in more people, because the area is a pretty small location. And anybody who's interested, who's not in this area or in the immediate area, who are interested in taking this course or taking this class, they can log in online and be able to receive the same benefits. So that it will be 6 o'clock p.m. on November the 14th. And again, I believe the class is $40. But go into Eventbrite and do a search on Brand Art Yoga is the name of the store, or you can do a search on my name and it should pop up. I and my partner in power will be back next Thursday, November 6th, for the second anniversary of the Health Walk, another milestone. I am definitely excited about this. You know, these are efforts that have been put in place, and I'm just seeing myself living in a dream and walking through this reality, living in my dream and walking through this reality to continue to build this platform and provide content that's going to help assist others in their life as well. And I am so honored to be in this position and to have these conversations and have these discussions and bring in guests that have these conversations and discussions revolving around health. And then we will continue to be dedicated to provide that information on this platform. And Sister Day, I don't know whether you're still here or not, but I don't know whether you're interested in coming back and doing a show or not. But if you hear this, if you're still on, send me a text if you're interested in next year, because the shows this year are booked up. Closing out the year, we have the anniversary show on the 6th. Dr. Henry Gregory is coming back on the 20th of November. On the 5th of December, Heraldess Adama Alaji will be back, and closing out the year will be Sam F. Reynolds, and he's coming back December 18th, and I want to make sure it is the 18th. Yeah, December the 18th. So come in and be a part of this experience. Come in and enjoy what is being given as a acknowledgement. Well, I'm not going to say acknowledgement. That is being given as a giving back to the community. I'll say that. I was looking for a particular word, but my brain is fried and I'm tired. I've been talking for a long time. But anyway, this is me giving back to the community. This is me and me teaming up with Mama Oriomi, giving back to the community. And we're going to continue to do this and elevate this and grow this channel as long as the Creator allows us to be here. But this does not happen without your support. And I support, and I am gracious that you take the time to come in and listen and be a part of this experience. So until then, until we meet back here again next week, November the 6th, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, here live on the Health Walk on Spiritual Pathways Holistic Healing, Facebook and YouTube. Until we meet again, peace and love all the time.